This is Growth Guide, a podcast exploring the depths of curiosity, questioning everything in the name of growth. I'm your host, Brian D'Alessandro. Okay, guys, we have a big solar eclipse in Aries taking place on April 8th, and this presents a massive opportunity for growth, catalyzation, and transformation in our individual and collective lives. For perspective, this will be the last solar eclipse that we'll see in the United States until 2044. And on top of that, it's going to last a lot longer than normal because the moon happens to be so close to the Earth. With all of this happening, I have naturally brought back on the show acclaimed astrologer George H. Lewis to share about the upcoming astrological event so we could all take advantage of it. George comes with a rich bag of knowledge, drawing from his time as a court painter to the Sultan of Oman, his time living with the Bedouin tribes in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Yemen, and Oman, where he was taught deeply to know and read the stars. Studying archetypal astrology in New York City under the supervision of mentors including Monty Taylor and the infamous Frank Andrews, who is Princess Grace and John Lennon's psychic. With them, he trained in numerous overlapping disciplines, including Ancient Hellenistic Astrology, Tarot, and Palmistry. George is here to equip you with everything you need to know, as this eclipse has the ability to both reveal or obscure. A lot of that is actually up to us, which is why it is best to be prepared to take advantage of such a powerful event. So without further ado, let's get to it. George, great to have you back on the show, especially as the upcoming eclipse is about to happen.
Yeah, it's really good to be back. It is a fascinating time. There's so many powerful energies out there, and especially for people who are on the cardinal cross axis, which is obviously Aries, Libra, and then Cancer, Capricorn, they're going to be affected even more by this.
And this is obviously in the Aries season, Sun in Aries, and also the moon will be in Aries. That's always the case with an eclipse, but the double Aries is quite potent. Can you talk to us about that and just give us a lay of the land?
Yeah, anyone who's got Aries in their chart, they're obviously going to be, if they're well integrated in their frequency, they're going to be pushing more towards freedom. Aries is the most associated with sovereignty, with self-actualization, with the ability to lead the charge. It's an individuation sign. Now, of course, the negative of that is total disregard for anything collective. But an integrated interpretation would be to show people the potentiality of freedom. And this Aries eclipse, especially with Chiron in the mix, conjunct Eris, the sister of Mars, we're seeing a strong push towards spiritual freedom.
Can you talk to us a bit about, for people who don't understand Chiron, what is Chiron and how does that work?
Yes. Chiron is one of the asteroids. It's between Saturn and Uranus. And actually in the myth, it's interesting because Chiron is actually
the wounded warrior, right?
He's a wounded warrior. I think some of these myths go back to the Atlantean period when we were experimenting very successfully, but also very unspiritually at times with splicing different genetic codes together. And the Chiron is the centaur. Now, the centaurs, if you go back to the myth, most of those centaurs were pretty aggressive and were not high conscious beings. But Chiron was incredibly high conscious. Chiron was the teacher, the spiritual teacher to some of the great heroes like Perseus, like Hercules, like Theseus. And he taught them how to balance the esoteric world with the exoteric world, the physical with the metaphysical. And he was mortally wounded. And he was placed into the constellation of Sagittarius. But he also carries a Virgo archetype as well. The whole point with Chiron is we're using the Chironic energy to work through our own wounds. Everyone has their own traumas, and we work through them in order to alchemize them and then to step into the role as spiritual teacher. So when you have Chiron with the solar eclipse, it's really, we are processing our old wounds. We are really healing a lot of those traumas that we've had. They're coming up to the fore. They're visible. That's what the solar eclipse is. It's an ending and a beginning. And we can alchemize and then to step into a higher frequency of ourselves, the best version of ourselves.
Big time for transformation. Can you speak a little bit to how the eclipse windows work?
This is an unusual eclipse. This eclipse is 4.5 minutes long. Most eclipses are 2.5 minutes. This eclipse is very biblical. Now, we could get into the whole conversation as to what does that program mean? The eclipse of 2017, which was really coincided with the timeline shift of this country and the world, went over 7 cities called Salem. Salem means peace. It's where the word Jerusalem comes from, city of peace. And then, of course, this time, it's going to go over 7 cities called Nineveh. And there's I think there's Nineveh, Texas, Nineveh, Missouri. Now, Nineveh, Indiana, is where the highest magnitude of the eclipse is going to occur. I think it peaks at 3:07 p.m. And then it goes through Nineveh, Ohio, Nineveh, Virginia, Nineveh, New York. And it's interesting, though. I like numerology. When you look at Nineveh, Indiana, 3:07, 3 plus 7 is 10. 10 is 1, new beginnings. Maybe the new capital of the Republic will be somewhere there in the middle. Who knows? Certainly this eclipse is very potent. Why? It's the 9th total solar eclipse since 1776. So it's the 9th total solar eclipse since the foundation of this country, since the Revolutionary Wars against Great Britain. So what you're seeing is an ending here. And really, when you see an ending, it initiates the beginning. I think there's been much conversation around the birthing of a second republic in this country. We've gone through our dark night of the soul. But what the Aries energies really, when you really look at them and you're pulling away from biblical narratives, you're pulling away from new age narratives, you just look at the archetypes cruelly and calmly. It's saying, no, power back to we the people. Power back to you as a sovereign individual. It's a return to the homestead. It's not giving power away externally anymore, whether that's pharmacological, sociological, religious, or otherwise, political. It's none of that. It's saying, no, the whole concept of America was the people, the family, the unit can have control over their own lives on the archetype of the homestead. And that's got to be reinvented. That's got to be reimagined. And I think that is happening across the country.
Yeah, it's apropos that you're bringing that up. I've been thinking about this, and I had a bit of an epiphany just the other day that we hear people talking about, oh, this next World War III and what that looks like, and if it's going to be an information war, or whatever that might be. And what clicked for me is we often think it's all about our freedoms, and it is, but this one, I don't think it's about our independence. It's a war on our interdependence. And in fact, I think it's been going on for quite some time. The interdependence is the great truth that we are all interconnected with each other as a species, with all life on this planet, and as above, so below, with the divine or the cosmos. We are all interconnected. And we have been experiencing this bifurcation and separation in a very divisive way on all fronts. This is through our media, through our poor quality of food and water. This is through our education. This is through our financial system. And all of it teaches us that it's all about the individual. And because of that, everyone feels so alone, so hopeless and depressed. And this is the great lie. And when we return to this great truth that we are all one, that is America. That is the cliche of united we stand, divided we fall. And so when we come back to that truth, I believe it's as simple as returning home, and we have the strength of numbers.
Yeah, we live in polarity consciousness. This planet is based on black, white, up, down, left, and it's finding the sweet spot between. The individuation of the human incarnate has been inverted. It's been kept within a very materialistic, limited frequency where really the individual has had no self-sovereignty. People have become slaves to their work, to the program. The educational system is one big program of propaganda and just keeping people within a certain frequency, perceptual matrix, if you like. And I think what's happening is we have to expand out of that. And as we expand out of it spiritually, we are able to be more self-sovereign, more independent, because humans tend to make very good decisions when they're free. They tend to be very empathic. They really do want what's best for their family and their loved ones. They haven't been able to be in a position to make those decisions because it's been infiltrated, the decision-making process, through air, land, and sea, whether it's through the water supply, especially in the United States, the food supply, the air supply. Everything's been corrupted. And the more we come to terms with understanding that corruption, it gets alchemized And so the individual can step up and do more beneficent things, do more empathic things, which is in the true nature of the human being. There's also been a lot of corruption within the pharmacological, of course, and that's the elephant in the room. People don't want to discuss it. This is a conversation because it's a battle between our biological and our transhuman. At the end of the day, there are powers and principalities at work, and have been for many years, who want to take away humanity, who want to stop us being a biological humanity, an empathic humanity, and want to move us closer towards a Saturnian matrix where we are within a very specific frequency of control. That is true. And so for me, it's about understanding the individual is very creative, and it's to do with the creativity. Human beings aren't able still to be fully in their creative magic. And that's what we have to encourage. The individuation isn't about selfishness. At a higher frequency, it's about the individual being absolutely able to create his or her magic. And when that happens, that's when healing happens. Because when we're creative, we're in our joy and we're aligned to those higher realms of cosmos.
This episode is brought to you by Zero Shoes. Barefoot-inspired, minimalist shoes with a natural fit and feel that supports natural motion. All right, guys, so I've dealt with knee pains and foot issues pretty much my whole life. I could never run more than a mile because of it. I always just wrote it off and said, all right, I'm just a sprinter. But the reality was there were underlying issues. And I was using things like orthotics. When I went to the doctors, they brought up surgery as an option, which I knew was ludicrous. So I tried a bunch of different things. I did physical therapy. I worked through building up my arches with yoga. And while some of these things helped, nothing allowed me to run until about a year and a half ago, where I listened to a buddy of mine who always wore barefoot shoes, and I tried a pair of Zero shoes. These are zero drop shoes, which means the sole is much thinner and it allows you to have much more flexibility and contact with the earth, but also they have a wide toe box, which allow your feet to open back up into their natural form. What we don't realize is with traditional shoes, we're binding our feet to the point where after a year and a half, I can't wear any of my old shoes because when I do, my feet are so bound and blistered. Since switching to Zeros, I'm running 2 to 5 miles comfortably about 3 to 4 times a week. So I definitely want to share it with you guys. Check out Zero Shoes. Huge fan. And we're often in service to others. And that's where the unity through community comes into play. I really believe that this is a big part of this shift. And the fact that this eclipse is double Aries, as you said, when Aries is ameliorated, it is all about service to others, right? It's using self to serve others. And that's, I think, the big transformative aspect here. That's so exciting.
Yeah, no, I love, and the co-creation aspect is a given. Anyone who's working at a higher frequency is constantly co-creating. I spent the last, week helping someone put the big garden in, and this garden where I'm staying in North Carolina feeds hundreds and hundreds of people each year. There's that creative magic. For me, that's a given of human beings bringing something to the table. That's why I study the archetypes. Someone's going to bring something different as an Aries bent as opposed to a Taurus bent. And of course, we have all the zodiac signs in us, even if we tend to have strengths in some areas. The whole point of alchemy is to integrate all those different archetypal tendencies into one, which becomes the soul incarnate and how we can manifest and create.
And to that point, for everyone who's listening, how could they best utilize the energies of this eclipse in their lives?
So the sun is a very interesting concept, and I think we're all learning more about it. I certainly, in the last 3 or 4 years, have been practicing some form of sun gazing. Now, I tend to do it in the first half an hour of sunrise and the last half an hour of sunset. I'm not one of those seasoned Tibetans who are able to not only sun gaze in the middle of the day, but also to get through the photonic light actual energy in so I don't need to eat. That's on a very different level. For most of us human beings, we have to go gradually in. It's like the allegory of the cave. We can't suddenly stare at the sun for an hour. It will negatively impact us. But a little bit of it is very efficacious. And once you start to develop a relationship with the sun, so you consciously interact with it, it sends light to you in a different way, and it can help repair the eyes. It can also help repair the skin. I have found putting organic coconut oil on my body from time to time in the sunlight has got rid of, I had a few moles, they got rid of the moles. It's actually helped activate my sun, my body, my light body. So I think what we're doing at this stage in our evolutionary history is we're rediscovering some of these ancient laws, some of these ancient rules about life, which we have, through various reasons, forgotten over many decades and hundreds of years. And I think some of that forgetfulness has been deliberate on the part of the control system. But then I also think it's us losing our connection as well. It's both. And we're establishing that connection. So the Aries solar eclipse, without going into all that fear porn, which is so often propagated at the moment for people to keep us in that fear loosh, actually is about us having that relationship, reestablishing that relationship, witnessing these amazing times. It's like a clock, certain windows. This is the 9th solar eclipse over the United States. It's a big deal. And I think 100 million plus people will see totality. And then another 200 plus million will have a 70, 80% total eclipse. Just to experience it with family, to really stay in its joy. Now, what happens? Who knows? There's always going to be, this is polarity consciousness. There's always going to be, at this stage in our evolutionary history anyway, negative impact at some point, because that's what polarity does. But I don't believe that's going to override everything. I mean, I think there are times in this world, 2024, where there is going to have to be still some more stuff coming down the pipeline to awaken more people to the reality. But what that looks like, I have no idea. I'm going into the solar eclipse with quite some excitement, actually, with friends, to experience something which I saw the last total eclipse in New York City in 2017. That was great. And this is a biggie. This is a culmination. This is a big year, 2024, for so many reasons.
Yeah, and you're going to be seeing the total eclipse, right, in New York and Buffalo, is it?
Yeah, I'm going to be way upstate.
So there's a lot of people going to see it in different areas. And then on the other side of it, we have some of these oddities or anomalies, such as the fact that a state of emergency has been declared in numerous states, even though there are plenty of activities that happen in these cities that amass a much bigger influx of people. So there's that. There's numerous rocket ships that are planned on taking off there. And I say this not to monger any fear, but just to bring to the light also that there's more mystery to what's going on with eclipses than the mainstream understands. And we don't need to understand the science of it to experience it. We know that civilizations for thousands of years have observed eclipses and felt the transformative power. And so without needing to try to understand or intellectualize it, we all individually have the opportunity to experience it and just ask ourselves, listen into our own wisdom. What are we experiencing? What does it bring to me?
Yeah, it's really interesting. This solar eclipse in some ways is also a metaphor for our state of affairs up until this point. It is, in a way, it can be seen as well as a symbol of darkness descending on humanity. Literally, it's when we go dark for a bit. It's the third eclipse actually in 7 years. And it is tracing this trajectory over a sort of biblical prophecy, as I mentioned, Salem and then Nineveh. But this eclipse is really, at the end of the day, because it's Aries, is a time for rebirth. And a near-death experience can be initiated, and that's okay. And I think it's part of us as spiritual beings coming back into understanding we're spiritual beings having a human existence. We're not just materialistic humans just here by luck, by chance, and that's it. And we die and we pay our taxes. That's very nihilistic and depressing. And it's a deliberate way to say we have no hope. And I think this is a time to reconnect with the Divine Mother. So you have the great mystics of the Condor of South America and Eagle of North America, the shamans of the American shamans, which are part of the Native American and Central American prophecy. And that's all great, the reconnection with the Divine Mother. But there's also then the reconnection with the galactic family, as above, so below. And we have been in a war for a long time. Yes, we have. And that's okay. But I think it's coming to a culmination. And yes, it can get a little messy before it gets better. But there is this level of consciousness that is appearing amongst we the people, which wasn't here 5 or 10 years ago. It's the allegory of the cave, which you and I often speak about. Plato's allegory is we're coming into the light. None of us knew, unless one was someone like David Icke, 5, 10 years ago, the extent of the corruption within the institutions. That's just truth. And understanding the chains of manipulation, but by understanding the enemy. This is where maybe the New Age movement has struggled, is they haven't wanted to understand the enemy. They haven't wanted to understand what has kept us in this vice grip, the global shadow government, those faceless men controllers who do have practiced certain magical spells, absolutely, covertly on society to create some sort of dystopian reality. That's being alchemized because it's being witnessed. That's really potent because when the light shines on it, it can be transformed. So that's where we're at this crossroad, aren't we? Where we can step into that freedom, Uranian concept. And what have we got? We've got the Uranus-Jupiter conjunction just a week after the eclipse, 2 weeks after the eclipse. That's such an amazing event.
Brute force training is my go-to for high-quality, durable workout gear. From sandbags and sandbells to rucksacks and weighted vests, these guys are consistently innovating and improving to make their gear work even better. They're vet-owned, so they know a thing or two about being battle-tested. Crafted in the USA to withstand the most grueling workouts, I grab the sandbag when I go on family walks, or I use it in high-intensity interval training to get a killer full-body workout while only needing one piece of gear. I also travel with my sandbag. I just empty it out, folds up, and then when I get there, I fill it up and I'm good to go. Brute force is doing a lot of work around unstable load training, which when combined with breath work and a mindful practice, it supports healthy regulation of your central nervous system. In normal speak, that means you're able to be more effectively navigating the challenges that life throws at you. Check out their full line of gear at bruteforcetraining.com/growth to get. It's really afford us the possibility of taking on new energies and having greater capacity. So even when you said like the New Age might not have wanted to see it, maybe they didn't want to, maybe they didn't have the capacity to either. Even with the rest of the world, if we were accepting the totality of the corruption and how deep it went, for the vast majority of people, it would crumble them. They would not be able to recover from that. And so there's a wisdom to how a lot of this unfolds also. And we've spoken to this before in astrology. For instance, there's a concept that a new planet doesn't reveal itself to humanity until we are ready and at a high enough vibration and level of consciousness to embody those principles. And so when one of these happenings unfold, it's opening up a door where we can tap into these greater energies. And this is a perfect example of it.
Yeah, no, 100%. This is a slow demolition. This is a slow educational class for we the people, for humanity. And it's been going on for a while, but I think particularly since how I see it, the timeline change of 2016, 2017, when suddenly people started to, and I forget the odd mystic in the cave or the odd amazing researcher, but more and more people started to question the narrative. Now that becomes very uncomfortable when we have loved ones who are still not doing that. And everyone has an experience of that where one member of the family or a certain group of the family haven't got to the level of being able to question yet. And so they're stuck in the older Saturnian paradigm, and others have moved more towards Uranus, the planet of innovation. And that gulf has basically increased. But what's happening now, if Saturn's over here and the people who are left, that's getting smaller and smaller as they come over to here. And it's a slow journey. It has to. Human beings can't evolve out of the cave in 1 or 2 days or nights, even in 1 or 2 years. It takes time because we've been so blinded by the illusion. And that is the age of Pisces. If I can get into the great year, which is the Plato language for the way the eclipses work. And we have something called the precession of the equinox, which is a 26,000 plus year cycle. Every cycle, every zodiac sign basically stays in its position for about 2,200 years, give or take, between 2,000 and 2,200. And basically we're coming out of the age of Pisces now. And I would argue with Pluto in Aquarius, we are now in the age of Aquarius. And this Aries solar eclipse is basically forcing us out of the illusion, forcing us out of the spiritual inverted program of the perceptual matrix, and pushing us, and it's painful, into asking bigger questions to find more radical freedom. And so that's what's happening. And in that sense, we're all doing it together. It's not going to be like the old days where it's pyramid, where you and the elite, one and the elite may do it and everyone else is left as serfs. No, the Aquarian age is about, we have to ascend as a planetary species together. We have to do this together. We can't just have total bifurcation. It won't work. You always have war. You always have disruption and pain, suffering if you do that. And that's why we have to do it all together. And I think it's slow and it's hard for people who are very awake, who have been for a while. They've had to learn radical patience and deep compassion for people where they're at. But it is moving from outlier to early adopter to late adopters. And then there are the laggards. There are always going to be a few people left behind, but hopefully that group gets smaller and smaller as more people awake.
Well said, George. So we also have some other alignments happening within the eclipse as well, right? We have Mercury retrograde. We have the north node of the moon. What do some of those aspects mean on top of this?
Mercury retrograde, especially when it's in Aries, that's quite volatile. That's quite intense. Because Mercury is pretty good in Aries. But what it will mean is the electrics will play games more obviously. Mercury's going to have a martial quality, a Mars quality, because it's in Aries. And also because Uranus and Jupiter are coming to a conjunction and it's around the solar eclipse, there is probably going to be electrical outages. I mean, I've experienced already with my phone and technology in the last 3 or 4 days. Hasn't been drastic, but it's, there's definitely been times where it just doesn't work or it's delayed. That's very Mercury in retrograde. So I think understanding there are these planetary influences, they do have an influence and they affect us all slightly differently, but collectively they do affect us. And I'm a great one for saying, try and get back into nature. We've all got so dependent on these technologies. And that's where the mission creep was going quite south, meaning it was, if we hadn't pulled back, we would have gone into a full-blown transhuman technocracy. And I think the timeline shift is reminding us of our humanity. And I don't want to put it in these terms that was a return to Lemuria and a rejection of Atlantis. That's too simplistic. But it's understanding the limitations of and the dangers of AI when we're not conscious. AI is so potently useful when humanity is vibrating at its real potentiality of biological, loving humanity. The toroidal field in the heart chakra, we all know about that. As opposed to giving power externally away, and then we become shells of ourselves, and we're not able to operate our own deep effectively. So part of it is a reimagining and a reawakening of our potentiality. Again, that's back to the Aries eclipse.
I want to unpack some of this. You speak to the electrical aspect, and it's easy for people that are just getting acquainted with spirituality and some of this language to confuse things with being the woo-woo or the new agey type place. The spirituality that we're talking about and astrology is very grounded in science. And when you speak about electricity, this is scientifically speaking about it. And when you speak about getting back into nature, it means grounding, giving that electrical charge a grounding. This is very scientific. So can we unpack some of this?
I'm going to be very Aries. Anyone, though, who still wants to label it woo, that's okay. They are going to exit on a shorter timeline. And what I mean by that, because they're then stuck in an older perspective. And that's okay. That's their choice. I believe in free will. I mean,
and this is the Matrix, right? The story of the Matrix.
Yeah, absolutely. So if Tommy out there doesn't like, the fact that actually you should get barefoot, get on a rock to pull up the piezoelectric charge, that's okay. Let Tommy think that and take his pills. His trajectory on this planet is going to be way shorter than yours or mine. And it's interesting, biological age as opposed to chronological age. Isn't it interesting? Saturn, Chronos, time. It's funny, I go back to Britain from time to time and I love my country, but people are obsessed with age. And there's a lot of Brits, not all, who are very caught. It's a Capricorn country. It's ruled by Saturn. People get very caught in that linear, logical perspective rather than the creative. And so people who don't want to understand that the rock or the grass or the soil carries certain frequencies and charge, especially when it's being charged by the sun, the rock, the granite rock or the soil, you are pulling that energy up. We are conductors. Why does one always have to define everything through science? If that's the case, then you are very programmed along an old-fashioned narrative of saying, trust the science, which really isn't science. That's trust the ideology of a cult.
The running narrative.
running narrative.
That's fed by whoever's funding the studies.
Right. And it's a cult. And that's okay. But if people want to follow that, then that's their choice. For me, it's very simple. I connect with nature. I teach people how to get barefoot and to activate with the sun, to activate with water, create structured water. And it's part of a holistic way of understanding life.
And back to the sun and water, these are things you spoke about with sun gazing. There's a lot of talk now where people are reopening to the idea that the sun is a conscious life form and a living entity. It's interesting, right? There's a lot of people that are able to accept, oh yeah, the planet Earth is a living being. It's one complete living system. Yet when we start looking at another planet, it's still another leap, but people are starting to accept it.
But let's go back to the elements. That's, if someone wants to think water is conscious, but then fire is not, they've got a little bit more learning to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because what are the four elements? Fire, air, water, and earth. And I go down from the most earth to the most inert. Earth being plasma, fire, masculine, yang, down to air, which is fire is spirituality, air is mentality, informational. Both are yang, both are masculine archetypes. And then you go down to water, yin, which is emotions. And then you finally get down to the most inert, which is earth, which is it's very yin and it's very supportive. Every one of us has to dance between those four elements. And that's how we create the fifth, by the alchemization, the integration of the four. So if someone to say, oh, we're focusing on water because that's there and that's conscious, but then fire is not. Well, they've got a little bit more opening up to do.
It's a missing puzzle. And so there's no wonder that there's such confusion. And the beauty is there's so many ways to come at it too. You can, come at it and look at the Platonic solids and see that each of these shapes mathematically are represented. And then the culmination of them and looking at Metatron's cube.
And the 5 states of matter. We're not just talking about solid, liquid, and gas. We're talking about plasma. We're talking about ether. And of course, we've all studied the original Tesla, and obviously a lot of that information was suppressed and kept hidden. And that's now starting to come out, the real Tesla. We're not talking about the fake electric cars. We're talking about actually free energy. Yes, free energy. It's there, it's available for us. And that's part of our great awakening process, as we'll come into this understanding hydrogen. It's not going to be electric cars. Of course not. That's limitation within the matrix. So human beings can't travel very far. No, it's going to be powered up at hydrogen cars, free energy, where we're going to build a glide through and travel long distances basically for free.
Yeah, and also getting reacquainted to these concepts of space and time and the limitations we've imposed as we graduate to this next level. And this is really that quantum realm that we're moving into, which is so exciting. Now, one other thing I want to jump over to is, have you heard that for the first time in a long time, they're planning on firing up the CERN Hadron Collider on the Eclipse as well?
I do, but I think where I'm going to, and this is just a hunch, I think this is part of the slow demolition. This is for the digital soldiers like yourself who start discussing it. It gets it out there to the collective just how dark a lot of this stuff was and could be, to flip this world into a truly dystopian reality. And it was heading there fast. And I have a lot of faith that here we are having this conversation now. I'm still traveling around the world freely, in a sense, relatively encumbered. And even if there may be some entities trying to turn something on, even if there is something, I feel it's a slow demolition. It's a visualization of seeing the darker players who were so hidden from all of us, me included, until recently. Tom, Dick, and Harry get to wake up a little bit more by learning about the Hadron Collider, by learning about what NASA may or may not be doing. I think this is information to awaken the public. I'm very positive.
Yeah, and again, back to what we were saying earlier, is the fact that it's coming to light now and being revealed says that it's a time that these ideas have come to be dealt with. Right?
And in that sense, I will say to your listeners, I am very excited to be here at this time. For me, this is a time where life really makes sense for me. Up until 7-8 years ago, my life didn't really make sense. And I'm talking in a big collective sense. I feel I have purpose like so many of us do because I've actually been waiting for this moment all my life. And I think many of you guys listening are in the same camp because there is a sense of potentiality here where we didn't have before. In the past, it was, okay, you work hard and you get a nice car or whatever you wanted to get, a nice house. No, this is really about the people waking up to consciousness. And once we wake up to that potentiality, the sky's the limit because our creativity is fully operational. And by having fully creative operation systems within us, we really can go to the moon and back. And I mean it in a really profound way, travel intergalactically and learn about all the different civilizations, rediscover our true history. Because human beings have been suppressed. The history has been written very specifically by a control system, and that's becoming more and more clear.
And that's another topic that has really been bubbling up, where so many people have been sharing different aspects of history that have been falsified and starting to illuminate some of that truth.
Yeah, 100%. I'm always learning every day, and I don't pretend that I have any of the final answers. For me, philosophy, spirituality is a constant of peeling the artichoke. Why? Because we're ultimately trying to get to the heart.
Beautiful. Yeah. Entry through the heart is definitely the way, right?
Yes. The brain has to support the heart. When we go back to piezoelectric charge, the heart carries far more charge than the brain, 50 plus times much more. But the point is, we've flipped it. We have to really focus on the heart. And we really have to understand that the brain must support the heart and not the other way around. In the past, it's always been about brain intellect. It's very yang, it's very dry, and it's very materialist. And it's very cut off from our emotions. That's why we're processing our emotions. It's a tough time. People are going through the traumas coming up, but it's being alchemized. So I think people are doing really, really well.
And as far as the idea of processing and digesting our emotions, it's long known. I mean, the Upanishads speak about this in, the Hindu lineage, that we have three brains. We have the mind, the heart, and the stomach. And the stomach is responsible not for just digesting food, but also digesting emotions and thoughts. And so it's important that we're managing that and honoring it well. So we're eating healthy food, we're keeping ourselves clean so that we can be a vessel to process these emotions clearly.
No, 100%. The food is really important. And here in the United States, that's been a major assault on the population. And that's one of the reasons why people have really suffered and continue to, because their guts are a mess with artificial foods, basically. It is a return to nature in a big way. And I had a lovely garden up until 2 years ago at my healing retreat, and I was feeding hundreds of people. Where I'm currently staying, she feeds hundreds of people. It's an absolute misnomer and inaccuracy to say we can't feed the population organically from the land. We absolutely can. And it's a fallacy to say that. And we have to return to the land. It is the homestead. Every family, part of what it is, it's relearning home economics. It's relearning animal husbandry, learning the real basic skills that we can support a life, as opposed to, going to university to learning social marketing or gender studies. It's absolute nonsense. We have to go back, in that sense, to the basics of who we are and reconnect to the land. We come here for a biological experience. We come here for a bodily experience. We don't come here for a technocratic, inverted zombie experience. And this is the reconnection to Gaia, to the earth, that all the mystics and teachers are speaking about today.
And layering on top of that is the reconnection to self and each other, the social aspect of community, because we've been fed this misnomer. And the next episode after this one, I record with Jim Gale of Food Forest Abundance. And his whole mission is around reclaiming lawns and small and large pieces of land to create food forests. And we're told that, to build a garden or a farm, you're going to be a slave to the land. And it doesn't need to be like that. If you're in tune with the wisdom of nature and the symbiosis that's taking place, you could establish food forests that take very quickly and have low to no maintenance. So there's a huge ability there. Another part I want to say is, homestead doesn't need to be that you have all these acres. You could have your small lawn and you're doing a part of it. Community is where you build that diversity and that resilience by being able to share. So if I'm growing all of the root vegetables or whatever, and someone else is growing, grapes and making juice and so on, there's an exchange that happens. We don't need to go out alone. And I think that's a big part of this new shift is unity through community.
Yeah, community is absolutely a given. I'm seeing this travel around the United States for the last 3 years as people really are setting up wonderful communities together. And it's very organic, meaning it's very natural. The hierarchy, everyone's sovereign. And I think that's what I like about it. Everyone's contributing in their archetypal way. And that's the future, because that's what it was always about originally when the First Republic was formed. On the concept of the homestead was always small, 1-2 acres. It doesn't have to be, it was never a grand farm. It was a rejection of the great European system.
And so, all right, you've been traveling around the country for 3 years, something that a lot of people hold as a dream of being free enough to do that, which they can if they get there. But what are some of the things that you've seen and some of the insights you've gained from that?
Well, I definitely have seen just how beautiful large parts of the United States are geographically. And once the spraying stops, and a lot of the states are stopping the seeding of the skies recently, the land is going to become even more fertile. And once we understand more about the cycles of, for example, where I'm staying at the moment, the lady here has over 50 chickens, and how she uses the chicken poo as really great sort of manure and nitrogen to help feed the plants and the vegetables that she's going to grow. It's the cycle, understanding the cycle. And I'm certainly no expert on that, but I definitely can see, just being a part of a farm, it really does show you just how creative one can be on such a small space and support so many people. And then I just have met so many people who really are creating, whether it's little healing temples, whether it's little farms, whether it's teaching people how to sew, whether it's one lady, she teaches stained glass window making. It's seeing all the talents around the country that are there, but that have been invisible for a while. So that greater visibility is exciting.
I want to use that last point as a segue over, because you and I speak about this, the importance of art and beauty in a world that seems to have grossly lost touch with its value. Can you share some about that?
Well, in the last 4 weeks, I've been here at the art studio and I've painted 4 or 5 pieces, and I've crushed up copper, which is obviously pertains to Venus, and I'm painting the archetype of Venus, and I'm crushing up quartz crystals, rose crystals, and different crystals to create this amazing luminosity in the paint. And it's very creative. And they also carry the potent energies of the time. So last month I painted Venus in Aquarius, where she was, and now she's in Pisces. I've just completed that. So I'm pulling in the energies of those archetypal and astrological realities. And so they carry a potent energy. That's just my way of connecting with the divine. You will do it differently. Tom will do it that way. Sally will do it this way. And I think it's just really reconnecting with our creativity is really helping us in our ascension process. And so I like to practice that, not just teach it.
And this practice of both embodying it by creating and also in teaching it, there's something special that I see it does that we're lacking in our current day and age. And it's slowing things down. The same thing that working on a homestead does. It slows things down. You have to observe and watch nature, which is moving at a much slower pace. And when we allow it to unfold in its natural time, the wisdom is all there. We're so caught up in this pace that's out of sync with the natural unfolding. And that's where I think art is such a beautiful practice for bringing us back into cadence with the natural rhythm.
It's very true, because you're just creating. I only like to work in daylight. That's my personal thing, because it's only through daylight when I feel I can get the colors correct. That's personal. Some people may work well with fluorescent light. I'm very diurnal, but I also feel beauty is such an intrinsic part. I'm going to be spending large parts of the summer back in Europe, in Italy and Spain, and the beauty of the old churches, of the old masters, the painters, is something that has always inspired me. I've been a painter all my life, and I've definitely followed the high Renaissance, in particular the Mannerist style of painting with the chiaroscuro, the light. And that could be from Caravaggio in the south to Jerome in the late 1800s. It doesn't have to be one specific era, but I think there's something about connecting to beauty, because beauty is a proportion, it's a harmonic, it's a connection to source creator. And when however we do it, everyone does it in their own way. There's no one size fits all. There is an energy exchange which is deeply healing and alchemizing. And that's what was totally renegated and inverted in the 20th century. Maybe we had to go through it, but it was an infliction. It was definite. That I won't go into this now. That's for another series. But the funding through the alphabet agencies of certain artists after the Second World War to keep us in a dystopian, narrow frequency. The shift from to 440 hertz, absolute case in point. The desire to keep us in a limited band of frequency, we are beginning to realize has happened. And now there's this expansion, hence the Great Awakening, towards understanding our capabilities, and art and creativity is at the front of that exploration.
Mm-hmm. And you speak to value of art. It's really also about reclaiming art with a value that is so far beyond the financial that has come to drive the whole market. And that has robbed so many of that connection to source creation, because we're infected with this thought about how we're going to sell it and monetize it.
Yeah, and in that sense now, not at all. I've already painted 4 of this collection. I hope to have at least 20 in this collection before I do an exhibition. And I've already had people wanting to buy the pieces, which is very nice. And I said, just let me hold back a little bit. I want the collection to be more together. I feel very integrated in this area now, where in the past, as an artist, it was always tougher. Sometimes making a painting and knowing I had to sell it to pay the rent or whatever. Art should be a divine connection. And then hopefully people can support it in a different way. Artists have always had benefactors.
And that's where, and we can call out to those in positions to really fund art, to find new ways to do it. An example comes to mind for me. The first time I ever went to Burning Man in 2005, there was one of 2 all wooden clocks built there. There was one in Germany somewhere, and the other one was built on the playa in Burning Man in the deserts. It's all wood gears, gorgeous. It looked like Rapunzel's tower, and it just sat there as a beacon. And come the end of it, they planned on burning it. And so someone came forward and said, please don't burn it. Here's $20,000. I will buy it from you. Someone else stepped forward and said, here's $40,000. Burn it. And that to me is the expression of, this lived in that moment of time. It wasn't about controlling it, and the expression of it being about time, and the fact that there was a cycle to it. And we had to have expression of lease, and back to the consciousness of. So there's all of this wisdom and ways of relating to art and engaging with it. And that's our birthright to take back. So it's very exciting.
It's a beautiful analogy, that. It really is, because at the end of the day, we have to release our attachment to stuff. And part of the new cycle that we're in is we will have less stuff, because we need to become less attached to stuff as self-definition. Who we are, our spirits having a human experience. We're not who we are because of the house we have or the car we have.
So interesting you bring that up, because this is 2 sides of the same coin that we're seeing in so many different ways. On one extreme, we have Klaus Schwab saying, look, you will own nothing and you will be happy, which on paper can be somewhat similar to what you're saying. But frequency and energetically, what you're saying is diametrically opposed to the divisiveness and control.
That's what the negatives do. They invert the truth. So it still appeals in some ways. I think I still believe in private property very much, because if you have high frequency people having private property, they will share it very abundantly. For me, it's always down to frequency. No, I don't think human beings are ready to own nothing, because the state is not ready from a frequency perspective to own it all. Absolutely no. It
has to be a vehicle of freedom, right? It can't be one of enslavement.
And currently it's a vehicle of absolute total tyrannical control. So no, at this stage in our evolutionary consciousness, I want more people to have their own stuff, to be sovereign. Eventually what will happen, those people will be able to share in such a way, and the frequency on the planet will be so high that it then almost becomes irrelevant who owns it, because everyone's partaking in it and getting so many great things from it.
Well said. Well, George, one last thing I want to touch on before we wrap up here is something I'm very excited about, and I know you are too. We've been working together on developing a beginner's astrology course, which is not your typical beginner's astrology. You go into the ancient myths and you draw from your time with the Bedouin people, learning from the stars directly and the planets. And so there's so much packed into this course we're developing, and we're launching it. At the time of the release of this, you'll be able to go to the website, georgehlewis.com, to sign up. There's already spots that have been filled up, and we expect this to get full very quickly. So please don't hesitate. We're really excited for this and hope to see you there. George, anything you want to add on that note?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really fun to teach this because, of course, I love teaching astrology. I've done it for a while, but I'm integrating, as you say, some of the myths and some of the more esoteric magic that we can all incorporate. And it's going to be quite practical. So it's rediscovering your soul contract, learning the language of the heavens, which helps us activate who we are so we become better people. We know ourselves better. And by knowing ourselves better, we have better relationships with everyone we come into contact with.
George, always a pleasure.
Such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on today.
All right, enjoy the eclipse. Thanks for joining us this week on Growth Guide. A big thanks to our sponsors, Atmananda Yoga. You guys have got to check out their yoga alignment mat. I've been using this for a long time. As you know by now, I've studied and trained with them as a yoga teacher, and the mat is incredible to deepen your practice and to ensure a lifelong injury-free practice. Visit growthguide.love/alignment for more info or to buy. Be sure to use code GROWTH at checkout for 15% off. One of the perks of hosting your own podcast is that you could sponsor your own brand. On that note, this episode is sponsored by Spirit Squad. You tired of your Matrix standard issued uniform? Have you pulled the thread and need some new ones? This calls for some 5D level ascension gear, such as our 432Hz classic hoodie and our Resist the Program Third Eye Kitty tee. Spirit Squad's got you covered. From ceremony gear to pre-ceremony gear to post-ceremony gear, we have anti-ceremony gear too. Are you raising consciousness while little ones are raising hell? We have the perfect gear for drop-off, pickup, and serving in the 3-foot kingdom. While you're at it, Spirit Squad has mini sizes, like our Feral Child shirt, strong enough for your little, yet sends a message to the fearful and weak. Give this one some space. Grab your Spirit Squad gear now at spiritsquadsupply.com. And welcome to the rebellion. Make sure to visit our website, growthguide.love, where you can find freebies, exclusive content, and subscribe to the show so you'll never miss an episode. If you found value in listening, I'd really appreciate a rating on iTunes. I can't tell you just how important this is. Or spread the love. Tell your friends, your fam, heck, tell your spirit animals. And follow me on Instagram at growthguide.love.